Lisa Fuller, thank you so much for speaking with Lovers YA today about your contribution to Hometown Haunts. The first question I have is, and we're asking everybody, it's a broad technical writery question, if you will. So it's very simple. What to you as an author is at the crux of horror and writing horror?
That's a really hard question because I am a giant wuss. And, I think reading Stephen King as a teenager terrified me so badly that I'm actually, honest to God, scared to pick up horror. And I'll do things like, I'll love Resident Evil and I'll watch it. I'll watch a good zombie movie, but then I'm going into the bedroom and I'm waking my partner up to make sure he's still human before I climb into bed. That's what I do to myself. But so I never really thought of myself as being able to claim that horror title. So it really surprised me when people started talking about Ghostbird as horror. But I was keen for it. I was ready to embrace it because, I think in my community, we tell so many ghost stories. There's a lot of things that, we're told you do and don't do this, and it's told through really terrifying stories, and it's really good fun as well. So I think too, I love things like the Babadook, which, is it's horror, but it's this really interesting look at grief. And I think learning just how broad horror is and how accepting it is of all these differences has been a lot of fun. Sorry, did that answer the question?
I think you answered what is horror, and I think it also answers what is at the core of writing horror. I think you kind of you gave us a few ways to think about what comes into writing horror.
Yeah, I think it's just my anxiety of claiming the title of a horror writer or horror writing, even though, because it really shocked me when Poppy got in touch with me and asked me to do this, but I was just really keen to give it a crack, especially because short stories have never really been my forte. Everyone says to writers, you should start with short stories, and I tried that, but it didn't really work for me. But now that I've got, my debut novel out, I'm trying to work on my craft and do more of that.
No, I totally agree with you about short stories. It just doesn't. I start short stories and then it's like, whoops, 40,000 words later.
Well, everyone who reads my attempts at short stories, until this one actually, and one other, I've been published once before with a short story. I would try a short story and everyone who read it would be like, yeah, this is a really good opening chapter. I'm like, oh, no. Okay. I think longer narratives are my thing.
Neil Gaiman says that he said a short story should either read as the final chapter or an opening chapter. But I think there's something else as well. There is something more complete about it that needs to be in there. But it's lightning in a bottle, I think, to get a short story.
Well, I'm trying. We'll see.
With that being said, having talked about how hard short stories are and how hard you found it to write a short story, I think your story in Hometown Haunts is I think it was the one that has scared me the most. I loved it. I couldn't put it down, but I was properly terrified as I read it. And yeah, you scared me. Yeah.
Well, that's a huge compliment because there's been quite a few of them that has terrified me. Sarah's had me on the edge of my seat ready to run.
I nearly read yours last night before I went to bed. I was like, oh, I'm too tired. I don't want to read it and not properly take it in. And I'm so glad I didn't. I'm so glad I waited until this morning because that would have been a sleep of nightmares. I can guarantee it, which sounds like such an insult, but in this context, not.
It's a huge compliment. And I always feel bad, especially on Twitter, when someone's like, you scared me so much I slept with the lights on. I'm like, thank you. I'm reading it. The whole anthology out on the deck with my dog and my sleeping bag, my bean bag.
I think that's the way to do it. I read one at night. I was like, bad idea. So my second question, and it's more specifically about your story, and I'm actually going to take a step back because what I really noticed was a similarity across this story and across Ghostbird, which I loved. And congratulations on not only its debut, but on the award that it has received. It's received more than one award, hasn't it? Received
it
or a
just
few
came out in the UK
nominations.
a couple of days ago. And it got
Congratulations on the release.
I know, I'm so excited. Yeah, there's been some really amazing reviews come in.
That's wonderful. It's so well deserved. I love Ghostbird.
Thank you.
No, just a great book. But in both Your Story in Haunted Ten Haunts and in Ghostbird, the heat of the setting was such a character and a characteristic. And I was really interested by that because the stories have, certain similarities across them and certain differences, but I found it really interesting how you really, like the character of the heat that pervades the story was something that I really noticed. Would you be able to speak a little bit to that?
So both are set in my hometown of Eidsvold. And yeah, it's, summertime, 45 degrees, 100% humidity. It is inescapable. And it is like trying to move under one of those, weighted blankets and somebody's wet it down. It is suffocating. And already you're in this small town environment where everybody knows everybody. And the running joke is, you can't fart in that town without two people hearing you. And by the end of the day, the yarn going around town is you shit your pants. It's like, so there's multiple layers of suffocating. So I think that's where it comes from. Because I might even I'm working on another short story where it's actually set in winter and it's out by our river. But I keep somehow diverting into that heat. And I think it's because it is this pervasive thing. And like when I moved down here, people were like, you say tar is bubbling. Tar doesn't bubble. I'm like, 45-degree heat? Yes, it does.
That is quite horrific in and of itself, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, walking on that, not fun.
No. And because you initially, when I think horror, I generally think, you think very like a lexical field of shadows. You think shadows, gothic imagery, cold, freezing, like where creatures emerge from the forest in the winter at night to eat you because they're hungry. But what you've done with the heat is you found the horror of the heat, if that makes sense.
Oh wow, I'll take it.
No, I find it really interesting because it's so evocative the way that you write it. It feels like you are there surrounded by the heat, even if you're reading it on a stormy 14-degree Melbourne day.
Awesome. I'm glad that came through. Yeah, it's weird though, because we have those, we have two seasons. It gets really stinking hot or it's cold. Our version of cold. I live in Canberra now. It's weak now. But and so it's really a huge feature. And the houses don't have any insulation. You're talking weatherboards with tin roofs, and so it's inescapable. And only recently have they been able to get air conditioning in. But when I went and wrote Ghostbird up there back home, my poor little netbook wouldn't turn on because of the heat and the humidity. And I'm panicking because all of my work's on there. It was my master's. It was the start of my master's, end of my master's. And, my aunt had one room that was air conditioned, which was her bedroom, and she let me write in there. And then my uncle did the exact same thing. If her house was busy, I could go to his house, and they're like, "Come on, bub, you can." So that was the only escape. And when I was younger, there was no escape because nobody had air conditioning.
Wow, that's amazing. I can't get over the netbook not open. It makes sense, of course, that your computer's for that. No,
but the panic level was real.
I can imagine. That the true horror story, losing all of your research.
Oh my God, I would have cried. And
yeah, no, I have that I have 4 backups that are like stashes, just stashed to make sure that all of my work is can only be lost so much, like a crazy person.
I've got Dropbox because I'm now paranoid. Because I never used to back up. And then, of course, I did that whole thing where I lost something really important. Gone. So now I've got Dropbox. Dropbox is connected to everything: my phone, my laptop, my computer out of the uni. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So that no matter what happens, I can't lose it.
And so that's the note we'll end this interview on. Some insight into writing horror and an important tip: back everything up. Dropbox works quite well.
It does. Highly recommend.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for your time.
Thanks, Alice.